So some of the things that, well, let's start this again. Well, see, it sounds so good when it's done, but not so much when you're doing it. Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to help you and your family cruise smarter. And I'd like to welcome back to the show our co-host, Christy Puttick from Pack Your Pixie Dust. How are you doing today, Christy?
I am well. How are you, Steve?
Not too bad. I am super excited about this topic.
Yeah?
Yeah? You didn't sound as excited. I know you are. But we had one of our listeners reach out to us. We kind of teased some pictures. He was kind enough to send it to us. And we kind of teased this probably a month ago, and we're finally getting around to recording this. And I'd like to welcome to the show Jimmy from Louisiana. How are you doing today, Jimmy?
I'm doing great, Steve.
And
glad to be here.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you here. And thank you so much for reaching out. And why don't you tell our guests a little bit what we're going to talk about today?
Well, actually, it's the island of Eleuthera, which to me is one of my favorite places on Earth. It is a beautiful piece of land, about 100 miles long, averaging about a mile wide, and beautiful beaches on both sides, beautifully clear water. And it is the site of Lighthouse Point, which is Disney's newest private island development.
Yeah, so we are going to talk a little bit about what we know about Eleuthera, and then we're going to get some of your thoughts about what you and your family enjoy there. So as we kind of jump into it, Christy, do you have any questions you want to start or anything you want to throw out before we jump into it?
No, but now that he's redescribed it, I'm excited about the show.
Now you're excited. Oh, all right. Well, the main reason, and I think there's two main reasons why Disney's developing or looking to build another island. And Christy,
they need the space.
Right. They need the space with 3 ships coming. The first one coming, 2021? It's going to be the first of the new ones, and then one each year after that. With Castaway Cay, they just do not have enough space with the amount of cruise ships, with the amount of ships that they're going to have sailing around the Caribbean to be able to stop in every day. And I think the other reason why, and I know we haven't really talked about this, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts, but with the advent of Perfect Day at Coco Cay with Royal Caribbean, and I know that MSC is developing a new island as well. I think it's kind of one of those things where they've got to keep up with the competition a little bit too. What do you think, Christy?
Yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting because Disney doesn't like to charge a lot of extra fees for stuff. And so much of the Perfect Day at Coco Cay is an extra charge. And so, or at least a big part of it. So I'm so curious how that's all going to work out.
And we'll kind of touch on that subject again, but any thoughts in your mind, Jimmy, is with just kind of those ideas as to why Disney is developing another island?
Oh, I think you nailed it. That's exactly why. With 3 new ships coming, especially with the capacity of those ships, they have to have another place to go. Unless they're going to base those ships somewhere they don't cruise the Caribbean. And the experience of Castaway Cay is so great. I think they just want to duplicate that and have, I know with the cruise I'm going on in February with my family, it's my oldest daughter's first cruise, and it's out of New Orleans, which is, right out of Louisiana, but it's not going to Castaway Cay, and she is bummed that it's not going there. So I'm going to have to get her on another ship that goes to Castaway Cay to make her happy. And I think a lot of tourists cruisers don't want to go if they're not going to go to a private island, which is why you see the proliferation of private islands like, the Coco Cay and the new MSC island. I can't remember the name of it. And especially the other newer islands that they've developed, on the Mexican Riviera. Can't remember the name of those either. I've not been to any of those, but I hear they're really special.
Christy, as a travel agent, is that one of the things that, when people are calling you to book a cruise, like through Disney or whoever else, is that one of the things that's always on their mind?
It's not initially, but I think it becomes such an important factor because it's a day they don't necessarily have to pay extra for. Or if they have the drink package, their drink package can be included on the private island. So you get these extras that it doesn't necessarily cost you extra money besides the cruise fare. And so that's a big deal. Or maybe it's less money. And then they also know that they're going to be fed and taken care of. And so I think those are definitely some perks.
Yeah, in my mind, it's, just listening to people talk about Castaway Cay and some of the other islands over the years. In my mind, it's just an easy day. It's one of those days where you really don't have to think about it too much. If there's things that you want to do once you get on the island, you can do it. There are some things you need to book ahead of time if you want to be able to do it, with the cabanas on Castaway Cay. But for the most part, it's a pretty easy day. You don't have to think about how you're going to get transported to whatever that beach is, and if you're going to get back, and how crowded is it going to be. You kind of have a kind of known to it, and I guess that's one of the things that I've picked up on as far as what people enjoy.
For sure. Back to the island too. One of the reasons Len Testa had talked about it on our show before, that Castaway Cay is going to be underwater, right? Is it like, I don't know when, 100 years or something? I don't think it's that long, but it was some period of time, like when their lease is up or something like that, it's going to be underwater. So they need to start planning, where else can they go?
Yeah, that was with the speculation, is if the seas continue to rise as they are due to how high up the island is, and some of the other islands in the Caribbean, that could be a factor coming up sooner than later, or maybe never, but definitely a factor sometime in the future. So another good point as well. Well, anything else about kind of like the pre-stuff before we kind of talk about some of the things that we do know about Lighthouse Point?
No, not that I can think of.
Okay. Well, just to start off then, some of the knowns that we do know about Lighthouse Point, at least at this point. I pulled this off of Scott Sanders and the Disney Cruise Line blog's website to give him credit for this, is that a heads of agreement, and I'm not a legal person. Do you understand what that means, Christy?
No.
Okay, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
What was the word, though? Heads agreement?
Heads of agreement is an HOA, was signed between Disney and the Bahamian government on March 7th, and it was kind of done... If you read the way it was done, a lot of people felt like it was done kind of backdoors, like it was done in secret for some reason. But so it came out March 9th, and the agreement was put out for everybody to see. And some of the highlights in it between Disney and the Bahamian government is that development and construction is going to take up to 4 years. So the potential opening date of Lighthouse Point, if they go through with it, and from right now it looks like they will be going through with it, is going to be 2023. There's an estimated development cost of $250 to $400 million to build it. And what Disney did was they acquired, and this is the part I don't have totally down. Jimmy, if you know, throw it out there. But Disney acquired 75 acres of the south part of Eleuthera, and known as the Lighthouse Point area. And in doing so, I don't think they actually bought it. I think they... Do you know if they bought it? I guess that's the question.
Yeah,
sure.
It's about 750, between 750 and 800 acres.
Okay.
And they did buy it because it was a private owner that sold it before. It was actually a development company that had bought it in 2008, I think, or 2006 or 2008. And it was a private sale from that development company to Disney.
Okay. Well, I stand corrected then. Thank you so much for clarifying that. The one thing that they did kind of put in there is, so they've bought the property itself, the land, but the Bahamas is still going to lease. They didn't actually buy the seabed around it. So the Bahamas is going to lease basically the seabed, which consists of the water, land underneath it where the proposed pier is going to be, berths, and a marina for 50 years. So Disney's going to have rights around that property for 50 years. And they've got the right to renew it for another 50 years. And from what they said, the marina is not going to be open to the public. Now, there is some stipulations where the Bahamian people will be able to come down and use parts of that property. We'll see how they divvy that up. But the marina itself would be only for Disney's use. So things like Marge's Barges, they talked about, having, potentially like jet skis like they do in Castaway Cay, or other boats that take people out fishing. Those would be some of the things that might be parked in the marina. And that lease is set for $1,000 an acre for the first 10 years, and then they're going to revisit it at that point. And then the last thing that I thought was kind of interesting was they said that Disney is going to work with the Bahamian government, historians, artists, and cultural experts to integrate the Bahamian voices in an artistic expression in their development. So they want to try and have the design of everything they do to reflect the stories and traditions of the Bahamas. And the thing that kind of came to my mind in that was Aulani. And Christy, you've been to Aulani.
Yes, that is exactly what I was going to say. This sounds exactly like Aulani.
Yeah, and Jimmy, have you been out to Aulani yet?
I have not. No. We're actually DVC members, and that's one of our bucket lists, but we have not made it there yet.
Okay. And
one day you have to, for sure.
And I think that everybody's been to Aulani, and I think for the most part, the Hawaiian people will agree that Disney did probably the best that they could, best of anybody over in the Hawaiian Islands, as far as trying to represent the Hawaiian culture, the people, and the traditions of Hawaii within that resort. Now, it still has water slides, obviously, and fun things for all of us that go over there and visit it. But within it and surrounding it, they definitely tell the stories. The luau is just amazing. It's all about stories of how the Hawaiian people came to that area of Oahu and kind of populated it. And then they also have Uncle, who kind of tells stories by the fire at night several times, and they're all traditional Hawaiian stories. He's not telling you about Mickey Mouse or Minnie and how they got there. They're talking about actual Hawaiian history. So I guess, I don't know, what do you guys think? I think that would be an amazing thing. I'm not sure how they will completely do it with it being a beach day sort of in some ways, but I think there's a lot of innovation there that they can do.
I think with just the architectural style they could, because a lot of the architecture in Eleuthera, it's just like any other Caribbean island that I've been to. It's just a lot of pastel houses, a lot of houses, things built with brick. But some of the older churches that, date back into the 1700s or so, I mean, they are beautifully ornate. They're still built essentially with cement and brick and concrete. But, I mean, they're really pretty structures, and I think they could probably do something like that.
Christy, any thoughts?
I agree.
Okay.
I mean, there is a look to the Bahamas, right? When you go into the towns, even if you walk in Nassau past the first two streets or whatever, there is a look to those buildings, and there is a history, and there is certainly Disney's so amazing with their research and their, I don't know another word for research, but they're looking into the specifics of a culture, and I think that they will capture that perfectly.
Yeah, I think if any company can do it, Disney is the company that can. I do know that back in 2008, the group that Disney bought this land from, they didn't have any plans to do anything architecturally original to the Bahamas, as their plan was they actually had agreements and from the Bahamian government to dredge all of the salt ponds that are there, build a big marina for yachts, and they were going to build, I'm trying to read here what the actual hotel resort was going to look like, but it was a very large resort. So they essentially were going to destroy the property.
And they luckily had approval to do that?
They definitely had approval. Yeah, and they sure did. So, because it's, and I'm reading from a point here that Hubert Ingram, which is one of the ministers of the Bahamian government, said, and I quote him, in 2008, a project was approved for South Eleuthera, which would allow dredging and multiple canal networks in the same property, dredging of the salt pond into the ocean, creation of marinas for mega yachts, provision of land for different homes, boutiques, etc. And this is what was approved for the property. And some may argue that the land will be destroyed, but this project, which was approved, talking about Disney, not talking about Disney, would have caused much more destruction than what Disney is planning today.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like it based on that comment. And so if that was approved, then how can there be so much outcry now? Well, it's Disney.
Well, the outcry is not necessarily coming from the Bahamians. It's from people like me who just like to go visit, or people that have private homes there, and they kind of want to keep this land, even though it's privately owned. Everybody had access to Lighthouse Point, and it didn't cost a thing. I mean, if your car or your Jeep was good enough to get down the really ragged road that goes to Lighthouse Point, you could go. And, it was like your own private resort down at the end. I mean, there was nothing there. I mean, you couldn't go buy a soda pop, but, if you bring it with you, it is the most beautiful place you can imagine. And everybody had access to it. All you had to do was just drive. And I think that's the part that's got everybody up in arms. They know that if Disney buys this and develops it into a truly a cruise private island, they're not going to have access to that like they did before. And that's the thing that has everybody up in arms. The Bahamians that I talked to on our trip in June, they didn't really have anything against Disney developing this property. They just really didn't. So the people that I talk to that do have a problem with it are all foreigners that own property there, or just visitors, they're shoreside guests. They just don't want to give up this beautiful piece of land.
Well, they don't really have a right then to even make those complaints.
Well,
I recognize that people do it, but you know what I mean? Like, the other developer clearly could have come in and said, no, this is closed now. And
Exactly.
you have to be a member of whatever.
And had this group in 2008 brought this venture forward, you can bet no one would have had access to that. And plus, they would have probably destroyed it since they were going to build these mega yacht, marina down there. I seriously doubt anyone would have had access. So, and the thing about that is, in South Eleuthera, and it's not an economically viable area. It is incredibly poor. Yeah, so for anything that's going to bring jobs to these Bahamians, that really, there's just nothing to do. They have beautiful beaches, they have clear water, and they have sunshine, but they don't have a place to go to work. And so if anybody can come in and raise the standard of life or the standard of living for these people, I think it's a win. Even though I hate to, it's kind of like my private place too.
Right.
I've enjoyed it on 4 different occasions now on 4 different trips, and it is the highlight of every trip we take to Eleuthera to go there. But if it means prosperity to the people of South Eleuthera, I don't see how anybody can actually be against it.
I don't want to compare the two quite as much, because I think that Eleuthera is a bigger piece of property, and there's a lot more going on there than what they developed in Alani. But Alani was already developed as a man-made. The actual coves are all man-made, and it was kind of a planned property already for resorts. But that's where we started going way before Disney ever built Alani. There was really only the Marriott, and then they were just starting to build Marriott's timeshares in a different one of the coves. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel your pain. It's kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it, Jimmy? Where it's good to see something cool like Alani built there, but boy, I miss the fact that we used to be able to take our kids down there and there was nobody on those beaches, and we kind of had it to ourselves, and now that's completely changed.
Right. And it is, but the thing with Eleuthera is, it's 110 miles long, and it's a mile wide. So that's essentially 220 miles of beaches and cliffs and caves and beautiful water. The Atlantic side of this island has just this, it's sugar white sand with little red flecks in it. And so it appears pink when the water rolls over it. So you have this white sand that's dry, the pink sand that's wet, and then this beautiful turquoise water. And that's all the way up and down the Atlantic side of the island. And there's some places where there are cliffs that are 60, 70 feet tall that if you're either brave or stupid enough, you can jump off of. It's just beautiful all up and down. Lighthouse Beach is probably the most beautiful point on, there's no probably to it. It is the most beautiful place on Eleuthera. But there are other beaches and other places that are not developed, and they haven't been developed. And I don't see any development in the future, that are almost as good as Lighthouse Beach. So, it's not like you lose one, you probably lose your best one, but the number 2 is sitting there, and it's pretty doggone good too.
So I didn't mean, I was kind of hesitant to say that, Jimmy, because I know they're completely different things, talking about Alani and Eleuthera, just looking at it and listening to you talk about it. But and we can definitely hear it in your voice, how much it's meant to you. And before we kind of turn into a little bit more about that and how your family spent the time there, I just thought it was good to bring up, a little bit of the opposition. So there is still an opposition out there. They're kind of fighting against Disney and the development of it. The only thing that I would say, and I'm not, the only thing I would say, compared to talking about what that other company wanted to do, if you look, and once again, you can go to DisneyCruiseLineBlog.com and pull up just Lighthouse Point Eleuthera. There's probably other places to see it, but I know that most people are familiar with Scott's website. And he's got pictures of how, just general pictures of what the initial plan might be, and they definitely keep the salt ponds. They're not dredging those up like you're talking about. There's 3 different areas where it looks like they'll have beaches, so hopefully that'll be all well manicured, and then the actual dock itself, the way they show it with the ship, would be well off of the property itself. I'm not sure how that would impact coral and the coral reefs around there, but that's kind of, if you want to go and take a look at it, that's kind of their initial development. I'm kind of hesitant to throw this in there. I may or may not. And I know that this doesn't have anything to do with the opposition, but one of our listeners is a stalker of Joe Rohde, and he's been paying attention to where Joe's been going, and he has been traveling to the Bahamas a lot lately with no apparent reason.
Well, and as soon as we were even talking about this idea of bringing the culture, you think of Joe Rohde, right? So that is logical. hilarious.
It truly is.
The listener stalking.
Yeah. But if you go back to that conceptual land use study diagram on Scott's website, if you notice at the very end down there where the actual lighthouse point is,
right,
it's the very tip with the little islands trailing off, into the sea right there. That area, 2.5 acres around the lighthouse, that has actually been donated back to the Bahamian government, along with the 190 acres that's outlined. And I know this is a podcast, you can't see this, but if the listeners would go to Scott's website and look this conceptual land use study up, you can actually see the 190 acres that they've given back as either a park or a national park or however they want to do it. But they're going to be able to, Bahamians will be able to access that along with, and one of the documents that I read researching this is they're going to be able to access the tip at Lighthouse Point also. I'm not sure how they're going to do that, but it says they're going to be able to actually still access Lighthouse Point itself, not just the Lighthouse Beach area. They also donated the salt pond areas back to the government, which makes that what they call crown land. Anything that's owned by the government's called crown land. So the actual 2.5 acres at the point, all of the salt pond areas and the adjacent buffer zones around the salt ponds, which that's a lot of land actually, and along with the 190 acres they've donated back to the Bahamian government. So that's a pretty generous donation, but they have, and also read in one spot that they have no interest in developing and are not going to allow cruise guest access to Lighthouse Point itself. So I don't know how they're going to do that. If it's with fencing or if it's just like they do, at the parks where you just have a wall or a natural berm that you just can't go past, that just won't be able to, cruise guests won't be able to access those areas, which is kind of a shame to me because that's the most beautiful point if you can stand on the point, but you're standing on a cliff that's 40 to 60 feet tall and,
well,
you just can't really you can't allow children to walk. And there's one area that's very narrow to walk out there to it. So I can't see, and we were there in June. My wife and I were discussing. We stood up there and just said, how is Disney going to be able to allow children to come up here? I had my grandchildren with me, but I held them really tightly while we walked up. But it's a beautiful place, and it sounds like their development plan is sound. If Joe Rohde has something to do with it, then it's going to be fantastic, I think. I did hear on Lynn Testa and Jim Hill's podcast, the Disney Dish, this week.
So the first week of August. So if people are going back to listen to it.
Yeah, first week of August. They actually said that one of their listeners sent them a survey that they got from DVC. And the question was if they gave a list of resorts and asked, which one of these would you most likely stay? And they gave a list of Hong Kong, Tokyo, Chicago, Orlando, or Lighthouse Point, Eleuthera. So somebody's obviously thinking about building an eco resort or a small resort, maybe a DVC resort at Lighthouse Point. I would spend my points to go to Lighthouse Point, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to bring it up eventually too. Since
too.
Yeah, since you guys since we're all DVC owners, but they also had ski resorts in Colorado and New Hampshire, Vermont, and I think Maui.
Yeah, that's right.
One other island I think over in Hawaii too. So a lot of they're looking around to see what they can do and not only make money for themselves, obviously, but also to enhance the experiences for DVC owners as well. So that's kind of an exciting thing to hear them put that out there. So, well, without taking sides one way or the other, I guess my hope, and I'll let everybody speak for themselves, my hope would be that, if they do go ahead with this, and it sounds like they probably are going to, that, with somebody like possibly Joe Rohde on there to bring about kind of the history and the stories of the area and bring about, like you were saying, Jimmy and Christy, as far as the look of what the true Bahamas is, and it's not kind of a cheesy, man-made version of it, but like an actual version of it. And if they can employ some of the Bahamian people and yet still give part of that property for them to use outside of the cruise guests, and maybe, and this is total speculation, maybe the day when the cruise ships aren't there, they can get down to Lighthouse Point. I have no idea how they would work that, but hopefully in the end, if they go through it, it will be somewhat of a win-win for everybody.
Right. And I think it can be. The only thing that the only valid concern that people that I talked to in Eleuthera was that, their point was cruise guests don't spend a lot of money on the island as compared to stayover guests or yachters. So I did a little research on that and said in the Caribbean in 2015, stay-over tourists spent 11 and a half times as much money as cruise passengers do. That's a big difference. I said in Grenada specifically, and I know Grenada's not a big cruise port, but only 5.7 of their total visitor revenue came from cruise passengers. And Jamaica in 2015, it was 7.7% of all the cruise expenditures came from cruise passengers. So,
I feel like, though, that has to be compared with, like you said, they don't get many passengers, the number of days that there's passengers there.
I agree with that.
I don't agree. I don't know that you can say that because it was only 7% that's a fair comparison.
Well, they're not buying groceries. They're not. You may spend a little money in a bar. You may spend a little money at a restaurant, or you may buy a few things. But compared to a stayover guest, I mean, I know when we go to Eleuthera, we have to hit, because there's 8 of us that go. So, we're in the grocery stores. We have to buy the obligatory T-shirts and souvenirs and things. So, we spend a lot of money when we're there, and I can see how that would work. But, the main group that's been in opposition has been Lighthouse Point Partners. They're a group of some different, just groups in Eleuthera that are opposing this. And they supposedly say they have raised $30 million for the purchase of the Lighthouse Point property. I've been following this property. So the first time we went to Eleuthera was in 2008, and I fell in love with it. And if I could get my wife to move, I would be probably living there now, at least a month out of the year. But she's not going, so I'm not going without her. So, so I've been looking at real estate since 2008, and about 2010, I noticed 750 acres for sale in southern Eleuthera. And looked at the map, and it's a Lighthouse Point property. So it's been for sale now for 9 years, before Disney purchased it. And if this group truly had $30 million, and it was for sale for $20 million, and, I used to kid my wife, I said, this great Father's Day present right here is just sitting there waiting for you. But anyway, she, if they truly had the $30 million there, why didn't they purchase the property? And they say they've raised another $10 million for development of the property. Well, if you had the $30 million to purchase it, you had essentially $20 million with your $10 million left over for development. You could really develop a pretty good eco resort, which is what they say they wanted to do. So, I don't know how much is actually real or how much they truly have. They may have, $40 million sitting there, and I don't know. But it seems like if they truly did, they would have proactively prevented a cruise line from buying this land, because we have talked about it since about 2014. I said, Disney, I bet Disney's going to buy this property eventually. And sure enough, they did, because it is so fabulously beautiful. I just, if they ever send a representative, well, that's what we always said. We just, hope the right company sends a representative over here, and it's not the wrong company, when they buy this property and develop it.
Well, I think you make a lot of really good points there, Jimmy, for all of us to kind of think about. And let's kind of turn to talking about your guys' experiences with Eleuthera itself, and we can kind of continue on with some of those points you've made. If as we kind of go along, please keep throwing those out there, because I think those are all really good, valid points to think about and talk about. So before we talk about Eleuthera itself, and we really didn't talk about this ahead of time, what's kind of your family's Disney background? You guys have cruised before? You talked about being DVC members. Can you kind of give us a little bit of background on some of the cruises you've been on and how you got involved with DVC?
Yeah, I can start with my really Walt Disney World experience. My wife went to Walt Disney World in about probably 1974, so that would make her about 6 years old or 7. So they were there when there was no Pirates of the Caribbean, there was no Space Mountain. There really wasn't a lot to do. So they were not real impressed. They didn't go back again until she was a teenager. I didn't go until 1999. We didn't do, my dad, when he took us on vacations, we had a little pop-up camper and we went out west. I've been all over, the western United States and the eastern United States, but we didn't do beaches and we didn't do theme parks. It's just not his thing, because he worked in the heat all the time, and the last place he wanted to go was somewhere hot. But they took me, and my wife and I had been married, and our oldest daughter was turning 8, and I had promised her before she turned 9 that we'd go to Walt Disney World. Well, my in-laws put this trip together, and they got us 3 rooms at the Polynesian. And I didn't know what the Poly was. And they really took me down there kicking and screaming. So I didn't want to go. I mean, I had no desire. I thought Disney World was going to be another Six Flags. And, that just wasn't appealing to me at all. But we got to the Polynesian from getting off the airport. We had a little rental car. And as we were getting our bags out, my father-in-law was standing there with me, and the guy runs out from the Poly, and he said, "Oh, Mr. Gilly," he said, "let me help you with your bags." He said, "Matter of fact, you just go inside and get registered, and I'll take care of all of this, and it'll be in your room when you get there." And I'm an optometrist, so we have a private business, and so I'm kind of keen on public service stuff, and like, man, this is pretty good service. He already knew his name. We hadn't even checked in, and I still to this day I don't know how he knew his name, but he did. And they took us in, put us in little golf carts and took us around and put us in a room, and I just was hooked at that point. I said, if this is going to be like this is something I can do. So long story short, that was my first trip, and from there we went to took our children back. Within about 2 years, we went back and stayed at the Grand Floridian and a Contemporary, and I was hooked. At that point, I just loved it. We started looking at DVC in probably 2009, but my wife will squeeze a penny until it screams. She just hates spending money, and I finally talked her into it. We became members in 2015. I bought a resale contract. My first one actually was at Boardwalk, and Disney exercised their right of first refusal on that contract, so we had to go back and start over, and I got Beach Club, which was fantastic. I'm glad that kind of happened now, as I really do like Beach Club. So anyway, we have those points there, and we've stayed all over now. There's probably not many resorts we haven't stayed at, actually at Walt Disney World. Started cruising. That's an interesting story, because in 1994, the company that I worked for was a surgical group, and they took a group of doctors on a cruise. And about 1994, we went on a Carnival little 4-night from Miami to Nassau. And I don't know if any of you cruised back in the early 90s. It was not enjoyable for us at all. That was back when, you had to wear a jacket to go eat. And I literally stood in line for about an hour and 30 minutes to rent some snorkel gear before I went on an excursion. We did not have a good time at all. And so we said, we'll never do this again. So we went 23 years without cruising. And I didn't miss it, honestly. But we were big WDW Today listeners back when, Matt Hochberg, Mike Scopa, Lynn Testa, and Newell were running the show. And we actually went down to one of the WDW Today reunions in 2012 and met all these guys. Cool. And just sitting around listening to Scopa. He had just gotten back from a cruise. And, Lynn Testa has written the DVC, unofficial guide to DVC. And so I started asking him, I said, look, man, we don't really like cruising very much. He said, and I said, sell me on it. And they did. And so I bought a book and started reading about it. And finally in 2017 was our 30th anniversary. And I said, we're going to go on a cruise. And so I booked one on the Fantasy, a 7-night. And Lynn Testa told me that, if she doesn't like concierge level on the Fantasy, then you can throw cruising away. This is not for her. And so that's what we did. We booked a concierge level on Fantasy for our 30th anniversary, and it was fabulous. I mean, it's just unbelievable. The first night we were there, my wife is truly a Southern girl. She thinks it should be illegal to not serve sweet tea at any restaurant in the South, especially. But, she just is offended if you don't have sweet tea at the table. Well, they didn't have sweet tea. And so the guy brought her back. He said, I know what to get you. And he came back with, it was a glass of just simple sugar because, solid sugar doesn't melt in cold water. So simple sugar solution along with a glass of warm tea and a glass of ice. And so every night when we went back to the table, it was sitting there, those 3 things. Every night. Look, she was sold at that point. So it just made a huge impression. So we did that one back last October. We went on 3-night with my youngest daughter and one of her friends, and which was great because they were 16 at the time, and they went to the is the Edge? That's the teen club. I can't remember if it's Vibe or Edge.
It's the Vibe.
Yeah, it's Vibe. So anyway, they would get home, or I say home, they'd get back into our room at about 2 o'clock in the morning when they'd shut Vibe down, for those 3 nights. I said, oh gosh, this is a harbinger of things to come in college for her. But Well, maybe I won't be there to see that. But anyway, they had a huge time. So anyway, we have another one booked in November. We're going from San Juan to Miami on a little repositioning cruise, just my wife and I. And then we're going in in February of 2020 from New Orleans on a 4-night with my whole gang. So it'll be 8 of us going. So I'm looking really forward to those.
Do you book concierge every time now?
Oh, no, ma'am. No. No. My wife and I, the San Juan to Miami, that's one we had actually scheduled to go on, the Disney Cruise Line blog group cruise, the double dip to Castaway Cay back in June of this year. I had to reschedule it because June of last year, lightning struck our house and burned it.
Oh, geez.
And we thought we would have a house finished by June of the next year. Well, we're still not in our house. So anyway, that's why we rescheduled that one. I thought we'd be moving into a new house, but we're not yet. So looks like it's probably going to be November before we move in the house. So it'll probably conflict with this cruise, but we're going anyway. So
yeah. How many more cruises are you going to cancel?
Yeah, we're not canceling this one. Yeah. Not at all.
I'm really excited about the fact that they're cruising out of New Orleans. That's a city that I really want to go down and visit sometime. And then the fact to be able to put that in with the Disney cruise as well. Plus for you guys, instead of having to make that drive either all the way out to San Diego or down to Florida, how cool is that to be able to jump down there and get on a cruise?
Yeah, it's going to be great. We can just drive down. And actually, I can drive down that morning. And I have been down to on the south end of the Mississippi River several times fishing. Spend a little time down there. So to be able to cruise from New Orleans all the way to the mouth of the river, I am really excited about being able to see that. Because, I'm only about 50 miles from the Mississippi River where I live. And one of my offices is actually, you look out my front window and see the levee of the river. So, we're right on the river. I spend a lot of time on the river up here, but not from the New Orleans to the mouth of the river section. So that's going to be really interesting.
Looking at it from a different angle, I hadn't really started flying down to Orlando until about 2.5-3 years ago, I guess, on a regular basis. And when we come from San Diego, a lot of times you come right over New Orleans and then out over the Gulf Coast. And that is just one of the most fascinating things. You can see it from the air really well, the channels that they've dredged up from New Orleans to bring the ships up into the mouth of the Mississippi. And I would love to see that as well.
Yeah, I think that's going to be one of the most interesting parts of the cruise is just the river itself.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's kind of turn back to Eleuthera. Why can't I say
Eleuthera.
Eleuthera. It's like the Schuylkill in Philadelphia. It took me forever to say that river name, but well, let's turn back to Eleuthera and kind of get some more thoughts on that. When did you guys first start visiting Eleuthera, and how did you guys find out about it?
Yeah, we went to Eleuthera in June of 2008. Like I say, we're in private practice, and since my wife and I practice together, when we're gone, we still have employees to pay, but there's no income, when we go. So we've never taken a really week-long trip. We'd been to Disney for 3 or 4 days over the weekend and then come back. And I think one time we stayed 7 days at Disney, but it was, like a Wednesday to a Tuesday or so. So we'd not ever taken any time off just to say, look, we're going to go. Well, I started looking in 2007, and what really caught my eye was actually St. John. There are villas all over St. John that you can rent, and they're not terribly expensive. So I was looking at villas in either the BVI or the USVI, and as I was Googling all of this, a villa popped up in the Bahamas, and I actually saw this house, 2 years old house with a swimming pool on 3 miles of beach. And the price for this 4-bedroom, 2-bath house was $2,000 for 8 nights. I'm like, wow, this is pretty good. And so I started digging into it, and I realized, that's on a place called Eleuthera. That's not St. John. But it really caught my eye because that was half the price of what a villa that size would cost on St. John. And plus it included the rental of their minivan for a week. So I said, man, this is going to be okay. I can't go to the Gulf Coast and rent a house. It's not even for double that. So I started looking at it and researched it, called the lady and that owned the property. And she said, yeah, this is our retirement home. We just built it. And they were from Pennsylvania. So this is our retirement home. We're going to rent it until it's paid for. And then we're going to refurbish it. And that's where we're moving. I said, wow, that's pretty good plan. So anyway, we ended up going there. And as soon as we landed, the guy that was giving me the car, I said, do you need my driver's license or anything? And he said, no, I don't need anything. Here are the keys. Bring it back. Leave it at the airport. Put the keys under the mat. Okay. So that's pretty simple. Didn't fill out any paperwork, no driver's license or anything, And so we get to the first little town, which is Governor's Harbor. It's a pretty little town. Pull in a little grocery store there, and what they call a grocery store, you would call a convenience store, except they may have some frozen goods in the back. We got there, and I noticed in the cars on the outside in the parking lot, none of them had their windows rolled up, and there were iPhones and just different cell phones just laying everywhere. And so the caretaker of the house, after we'd been there for a couple of days, I asked her, and she was raised on Eleuthera. I said, what's the deal with nobody rolling up their windows? You're not worried about theft? She said, no, you don't worry about theft. Nobody's going to steal anything here. She said, you can leave your house unlocked. Don't even worry about taking the keys out of the car. I said, really? She said, yeah, on Eleuthera, that's true. Now, if you go to Nassau, they'll kill you for your tennis shoes. I'm like, oh, okay. But it's just a totally different place. It's a step back in time. I mean, even I don't lock anything when we're there. And I've never had anything stolen. Actually, sitting in a restaurant, well, I say a restaurant, most of the little places you buy food in Eleuthera are in the back of someone's house. They have a little couple of tables set up in a spare room, and you call them, tell them what you want, and they'll cook for you, and it'll be ready when you get there. So I was waiting for something to eat, and a policeman walked in, and I started talking to him. And I said, well, what kind of work do y'all do? What do you mainly do in Eleuthera? And he said, well, there's an occasional some petty theft, someone will steal a laptop. He said, the problem with that is we all know each other. He said, as a matter of fact, most of us are kin to each other, and so it's really easy to catch the guy. And he goes to Nassau. And he said, and sometimes we see him back, sometimes we don't. And like, wow, that's pretty interesting justice system. But he said, you don't have to worry about, locking your stuff. You're not going to have any problem with that. And again, that's another reason I just love this island. It's so safe. It's just really, really easy.
Where do you fly into?
There's three airports on the island. One at Rock Sound, which is the nearest to Lighthouse Point. One at Governor's Harbor, which is about halfway up the island, and one at North Eleuthera. North Eleuthera is the only one that has jet service. So you have to, if you fly, like last time we flew there, we flew Delta, which was just from here to Atlanta to Eleuthera. It's about 2.5 hours from Atlanta. So, and we flew in a CRJ, just a little, regional jet. But the Governor's Harbor Airport, it did not allow any international flights until just recently. They had to build, do all the security things for the airport. Just had to build a fence around it and establish all the perimeter. But they have that done now. So I think a couple of airlines fly there, but I don't think they have any jet service, flying into Governor's Harbor. Rock Sound on the south end was actually built by Juan Trippe from Pan Am Airways days back in the 50s and 60s. But it has no security at all. So nothing from the United States can fly there. You can fly out of Nassau and get there, but you can't come from the States. Yeah, but it's interesting. So, if we fly into North Eleuthera, it's about a 50-mile car ride, but it is one of the most beautiful rides, that you'll see. So I don't mind making that trip at all. So, and the houses we always find those on either, the first one was kind of before VRBO or HomeAway started. So that was just a direct find by Google search. But now everything we find is on VRBO or HomeAway.
I wonder if that, when Juan Trippe bought that property, was that when they were flying the flying boats by any chance, or was that? Do you think that was developed? This is a total side note, I know. Would you have?
Yeah, it was afterwards because he bought it. Yeah, he actually bought it from Arthur Vining Davis, which was the Alcoa Aluminum president. Okay, he actually bought 7,000 or 8,000 acres in South Eleuthera and developed it into several different golf courses. I mean, in the 50s and 60s, Eleuthera was the place to be. He had a huge resort there. There's another gentleman, last name's Levy. I can't remember his first name. But anyway, he was a wool and textile manufacturer from Rhode Island. He had 6,000 or 7,000 acres in North Eleuthera where he cleared all the land and brought tractors over and brought cows over and chickens. He actually started agriculture in Eleuthera. And actually, when you drive through today, there's still silos. They're abandoned and they're falling down, but there's still silos on the side of the road from this. And he did that in the 30s and 40s before World War II.
Wow.
And actually, Eleuthera was the number one pineapple growing country or island. Bahamas produced more pineapples than anybody in the world in the 30s and 40s until the United States government actually began subsidies to Hawaii. and that killed the pineapple industry in Eleuthera. But you can still get, I'm telling you, if you ever taste an Eleutherine pineapple, they're about half the size of a Hawaiian pineapple, but they're just like a piece of candy. They are so sweet, and the flavor is real subtle. Man, it's so good. It just makes me just not even want to buy them now. Unfortunately, there are not many people that grow them because pineapple growing is really labor intensive, and kind of like everywhere else, not many people want to go into agriculture anymore. Anyway, back to the trips. We went again in May of 2010, June of 2014. I took my wife right after my oldest daughter's wedding. 2 days after the wedding, we hit the road and went to Eleuthera to decompress for a little while.
Like your own little honeymoon.
We did, yeah. We definitely needed it, too. But anyway, we went back this past June just because we'd heard the Disney thing, was coming with Lighthouse Point. And we were just determined to see it one more time before any development happened.
We talked a little bit about the area of Lighthouse Point, and I want to go back there one more time before we finish up. But what are some of the other things that you guys enjoy doing on the islands while you're there?
Well, there's several things. I mean, if you want to go fishing, bone fishing is really popular there. Obviously, any kind of troll fishing, like for sailfish or tuna, that's available. We've been scuba diving a couple of times, and there are fabulous dive sites all around Eleuthera. One in particular that I have not done yet, but I want to. There's a ridge called the Bridge that goes from South Eleuthera. Essentially, Lighthouse Point runs over to San Salvador Island, where there's 2,000 to 3,000 foot deep water on each side of this ridge, and the ridge runs about 60 to 80 feet deep, but it's 60 or 70 miles across to San Salvador. So you have all this current that runs across this ridge, and I hadn't been there, but I've seen pictures, and the coral growth is just unbelievable, and the aquatic life is just crazy there. But yeah, there's all kind of dive sites. We just like to go around and look. We'll go from one beach in the morning to a different beach. The beaches are completely different from the Atlantic side over to what they call the Caribbean side. It's actually just the west side of the island. It's still the Atlantic Ocean, but they all call it the Caribbean. But it's really calm on the Caribbean side, and it's a lot more wave action on the Atlantic side. The sand is different on each side. You find a lot more sand dollars and starfish and conch on the western side of the island than you do the eastern side. But there's little places like there's a thing called, we found this last time, called Blue Sapphire Hole. It's literally a hole in the ground with this sapphire blue water that is, it is the color of the sky. It is so blue, but it's a salt water, just a hole in the ground, probably 20 to 30 feet down to the water. And the water is another probably 20 to 30 feet deep. So we had a great time jumping off into that hole, and it's just in the middle of the forest. You find little things like that all over the island. There are caves you can explore. There's an area to surf called Surfers Beach. I am definitely not a surfer, and so we enjoy watching the waves and watching the people surf, but I don't do it. So, but yeah, it's kind of fun as you can have your car and just find a little road that runs off of the main highway. There's only one highway that runs up and down through Eleuthera called Queens Highway, but any little road to the right or the left, you take it and follow it to the end, you're going to run into a beach, or you're going to run into a cliff, or just something interesting. So you just go explore. We just don't know what's down there. And so, the Bahamian law is a little different than American law, so you can really, as long as it's not someone's private land, you're free to go on it. And as long as your feet are in the water or actually on the beach, you're on Queensland, so you can go anywhere. Anyone's welcome to that land.
For people who are divers, my oldest son just got his license, or just got certified. They have scuba companies on the island itself that will take you there, or do you have to bring your own stuff?
No, there actually are three. We went with one from South Eleuthera called Ocean Fox, and it was fantastic. We had a really good time. The guy that was our dive master on that dive is now started his own dive company. So now there are two dive companies in South Eleuthera, and there's one in North Eleuthera also. But yeah, their dive sites are incredible. Matter of fact, my first dive in saltwater was there, and my youngest daughter's first dive was there too. But my son actually worked on a dive boat. He actually asked for his senior trip when he was in 11th grade. He said, I found this thing I want to go on. It's a boat where you just work to dive. And so it is a bunch of teenagers his age. They did some educational things, but you go for 3 weeks and essentially dive 3 times a day.
Wow.
But you also learn to pilot a boat and navigate, and so it was a really, really good tour. But he did that, and they started out in the Exumas and went all around Eleuthera and dove all around Eleuthera and down to San Salvador and Long Island. So he has done a lot of diving in that area, and he says the diving in the Bahamas is much better than. He's also been on the same trip in the BVI and the USVI, and they went to the Leeward Islands of St. Kitts, St. Martin, Statia. So he's done a lot of diving in the Caribbean, but he says by far around Eleuthera is some of the best.
Do you have the name of that by any chance? Do you know off the top of your head?
Of
the company kind of went through to be able to do that?
Oh, yeah. It's called SeaTrek BVI.
SeaTrek BVI. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. And the guy's actually from Michigan. Well, he's from Texas, but his wife, he went and got I think he got a master's degree from University of Michigan, met his wife there, and she kept him there. So he summers in the BVI, and they spend all the winters. That sounds silly, doesn't it?
It does. I feel like
in Michigan.
I feel like he has that wrong.
Yeah,
he's not doing that right.
My son went on 3 of those trips, and he has over 100 dives. So
wow.
Yeah, but to being able to pilot a boat and do navigation and stuff, it's really, really good. I'd recommend that to anybody's children, and they're very safe. He doesn't let. The guy's name's Captain Monk. He doesn't let anything happen to any children. He's really, really safe. And he has really a mess up one-time policy, and he will put you on the airplane back home. So, literally, he does not allow, alcohol or any kind of drugs or anything. You're just gone, which, I highly respect that when you have a group of teenagers on a boat. You
right.
cannot allow that, so.
And then on a boat, scuba diving.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So that's I think
awesome.
that would be right up my Hollis alley, his alleyway when he gets to be that age. Well, as we kind of finish up again, Jimmy, I could tell the love in your voice and what it's meant to you and your family over the years, and what it means to as you've come to find out, the people of Eleuthera itself. Can you kind of give us some final impressions of just Eleuthera and then down to Lighthouse Point itself?
Yeah, I can. Eleuthera is such a beautiful, special place. It is literally stepping back in time. People are so nice. You don't go there if you want to parasail or sea-doo or, have 5-star meals. You're not going to do any of that in Eleuthera. It's really back to what the Caribbean was, I think, in the 50s. But it is such a unique place. They're unique people. People are just willing to talk to you. If you spend the time to get to know them, they'll sit down and tell you all about the area. Most of those people that live on Eleuthera were born there. And if they weren't born there, they're born in the Bahamas and moved there early in their lifetime. So they have all kinds of stories to tell. It is just a fascinating place. The expats that you see there, are very nice. I met a couple from England that had been there for 23 years. And I asked them, I said, why did you choose Eleuthera? She said, well, we could have lived anywhere in the world. We traveled everywhere in the world we thought we want to live, and this was the best place. That's a pretty ringing endorsement. But there's just so much different things to do. You can fish, you can swim, you can beach bum. Literally, you can snorkel. Some of the best snorkeling in the world, I think, is right there in Eleuthera. But what I like about it is just the downtime. My phone doesn't work there. It doesn't work there because I don't want it to work there. So I don't have to worry about work. We can just sit around and enjoy each other as a family without worrying about all the junk that goes on with the work world and the school world. But the beauty is just amazing. Like I was telling you before, you can take a little dirt road off the main road and you end up at a cliff. Well, that cliff may lead to a little hidden beach under the rocks. And it's just, we've done this just countless times. And it's such a beautiful place. And I wish I could, it's hard to do this with just my voice. I'm a terrible speaker.
No, you're
trying to tell you what I really, really like about the island. But, to me, it's just, why is Lighthouse Point? And it all comes back to Lighthouse Point because, although all of Eleuthera is beautiful, Lighthouse Point is just the capstone. It's the icing on the cake because it is so remote. And I think part of the attraction is how much effort it takes to get there, because it's a long ride in a car on essentially deserted paved roads. And then you get on it's a dirt track for the last 7-8 miles. And, it may take an hour for you to drive those 7 or 8 miles. The road's so bad. But when you do finally get there and you walk across the cliff that you go to see the beach, and it opens up it's just such a special place. It is such a beautiful place. When you're standing on the cliffs at the end of that point, you know it's a special place. It's a timeless place. It's a place really like no other else on earth. You just want to sit and soak it in. I know the first hour my family and I were there, we just sit and we grin at each other every time. It's such a beautiful place. And it's just like we're sharing a secret among each other because there's so few people there. Cares just really melt into the water when you survey what's around you and you drink in this really resplendent piece of land. Islands just trail off into the sea like emeralds into a sea of sapphires. The water is so blue. And it's just something that, it's super, super special. It's kind of like the first time I saw my wife walking through the Student Union building when we were in college. Didn't know her, I said, this is a special person, and luckily she, I don't know. People think she was drunk or I got her drunk or something when she agreed to marry me. But anyway, she doesn't drink. But anyway, so it wasn't that. So, but anyway, it's just such a special place. And you can feel it as soon as you walk there because it's just you and the water and the sand and the wind and the sound of the wind through those casuarina trees. It's just such a great place. And if Disney Cruise Line does develop this, and I kind of hope they do because you can share this with so many other people. And hopefully, for me, it all comes back to the Eleutheran people. If Disney can bring people there and they can fall in love with this place like I have, maybe they'll take a land vacation there and spend some money and get some economic development going on the island itself. Because it is it's a poverty-stricken place. The people are super, super happy, I guess, because they don't know any difference. My mom and dad both grew up in the Depression. They said they were happy as children because they didn't know. They didn't know what money was because they didn't have any. And I think Eleuthera is kind of like that. These people are just completely happy where they are. But, man, if we could bring some economic development to them, I think that's truly worthwhile. And if Disney can do that through the development of Lighthouse Point, because I think they're going to do it the right way. They're not going to dredge up coral reefs, and I just don't think they're going to destroy it like a lot of the opposition thinks they're going to. So if they can do this and they can bring some development to this island, I'm all for it.
I don't think either of us could summarize or top what was just said.
I agree completely. Jimmy, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your experiences, your family's experiences on Eleuthera, and kind of a little bit of the background, the history, and the story of this island. And I think all of us that are Disney fans, we love Disney Cruise Line. We love cruising in the Bahamas. We like to go around and see the world and experience new things. But I think the majority of us would want to see Disney do it the right way, too. And I guess our hope probably is my hope, I guess I should say, should speak for myself, is that they do it the right way. And that's my hope. And if somebody like Joe Rohde's involved, I hope that can carry over and, like you said, be a place where it can share, other people can see it, and maybe bring, a little bit more light to the people of Eleuthera as well.
Yeah, and I hope so. And I really think Disney will. Disney is a pretty amazing corporation. So, it's they have their flaws, and every corporation does. So, but I think if anybody got this piece of land, it would do it the right way. Because somebody was going to buy it. It's too beautiful for someone not to develop. And what Disney has planned, I think, is the right way to do this.
Well, as we finish up, we kind of know what's next for you guys with the cruise coming up. And it's really been our pleasure having you on the show today. Any final thoughts, Christy, as we finish up?
Just thank you. It was truly fascinating. I did not exactly know what I was getting into tonight. I will be completely honest. And I've just been amazed. I cannot wait to go there now.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. I've not traveled around the world, so in my little sphere of travel, this is one of the most beautiful places. Sometimes you can stand on a mountaintop like Snowmass in the winter and look across on a really clear day, and it's the same thing you feel there when you can see so far and it's so pretty. But Eleuthera it just tops that. It's just such a beautiful place. So, and I could go on and on about it. It's, when it's your favorite place, it's kind of like your favorite person you can talk about, So I could just go and go. But it's really, I hope it encourages some people to go there, whether they go on Disney Cruise Line or just take a land vacation, and just experience what Eleuthera has done for us.
Definitely. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experiences, Jimmy. And we want to wish you the best as you guys head out on your next cruise. And it's been such a pleasure talking to you today. We'd love to have you back on after that cruise, or if we hear about some more developments about what's going on with Lighthouse Point, we'd love to have you come back on and kind of give your thoughts about it as well.
Absolutely. Sounds great. Really enjoyed it.
All right. Well, thanks again, Jimmy, and we will talk to you soon. All the best. Well, that's going to wrap up our show today. Once again, I really want to thank Jimmy for coming on and sharing his and his family's just amazing experiences as they have vacationed down near Lighthouse Point and on the beautiful island of Eleuthera. Just such an amazing history and a lot of knowledge which he was able to share with us today. I hope each and every one of you enjoyed this kind of look into the beautiful island of Eleuthera out in the Bahamas. And I would be remiss if I did not give credit to Adam from Philadelphia. He is the one who we kind of talked about in this show, who was kind of following Joe Rohde. And as was confirmed at the D23 Expo, Joe Rohde will be heading up the whole build and kind of design of Lighthouse Point on the island of Eleuthera. If you would like to get a hold of Christy and I between now and our next show, you can always reach me, Steve at the DCL Podcast. You can always reach me on Facebook at DCL Podcast and on Twitter as well at DCL Podcast. Of course, you can always find Christy over at Christy at PackYourPixieDust.com, Pack Your Pixie Dust on Facebook, and PackYR Pixie Dust on Twitter. If you would like to support the show, you can find out all the information over at patreon.com/DCL Podcast. We thank each and every one of you who have signed up to support the show. And we want to thank all of you who come back and take a listen each and every week. We sure do appreciate it. We love the interaction that we've had with you and all of our listeners out there, on a weekly basis. And between now and our next show, if you guys are heading out on your next vacation, all of us here at the DCL Podcast would like to wish you fair winds and safe travels as you head out on that next adventure. Once again, thanks for coming back and taking a listen, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.